China has issued sovereignty claims through its Coast Guard for the first time in waters south of Japan's Yonaguni Island, which lie within the overlapping exclusive economic zones of Japan and Taiwan. And just this week, Chinese and Russian warships squeezed through the tiny straits of Tsushima and Osumi, as well as the Miyako Strait to the Pacific. So, going back to the Chinese surveying Coast Guard patrol, the Shangyang Hong 22 set off from China on June 10th and for 10 days encircled the islands of Senkaku or Diaoyutai, as well as Yaeyama, Miyako and Yonaguni. During that time, for 3 days, 2 Chinese Coast Guard vessels escorted the survey ship off Japan's westernmost island closest to Taiwan.
中国海警局の船舶等が与那国島南方の我が国排他的経済水域を断続的に航行し、同海域について独自の主張を行ったことを確認しております。こうした中国側の活動というのは、我が国としては受け入れられず、
Beijing said it was responding to a Tokyo-Manila agreement in May to launch bilateral talks about their maritime boundary east of Taiwan. Now, a week later, on June 24th, a first phase of 6 Russian nuclear bombers conducted a patrol over the East China Sea. Then, days later, a second phase of multiple Chinese and Russian bombers and jets, for a total of 10 bombers or 15 aircraft, circumnavigated Japan's southern half. In the same press conference, Minoru Ikehara said this.
両国による度重なる爆撃機の共同飛行は、我が国周辺における活動を拡大、活発化を意味するとともに、我が国に対する示威行動を明確に起としたものであり、我が国の安全保障上重大な懸念です。
China's H-6K can carry up to 6 long-range cruise missiles, while the nuclear-capable H-6N carries a single nuclear air-launched ballistic missile. And yet, as we explored in my last show, China says Japan is the one militarizing.
这是在突破日本宪法、国际法规制和专守防卫等原则，挑战战后国际秩序，与日方自诩的和平国家形象背道而驰。日本新型军国主义乘势为患，威胁地区和平稳定，国际社会必须高度警惕，坚决遏制。
Should Beijing look in the mirror, as the Philippine Defense Secretary said recently, or is Japan, the US, or even Taiwan the aggressors in this equation? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ika Vat. To discuss this and more, I'm joined by Igata Akira, University of Tokyo RCAST Economic Security Intelligence Lab Project lecturer. We also have Alexander Huang, Council on Strategic and Wargaming Studies Chair, and Michael Chen, Democratic Progressive Party International Affairs Director. A very warm welcome back. Alex, let's start off with you. So what sort of message do you think all this activity sends?
I think, from one angle, it's a Chinese reaction to the May agreement between Japan and the Philippines on the maritime bordering negotiation. The other is because of the timing, because we have multiple military exercises from all parties, China, Russia, and also the Pacific Rim, in terms of the aircraft involved, in terms of the Navy and air, combined exercises, and also the scale and numbers of aircraft that involved in the China-Russia air combat readiness patrol exercises.
So you do agree that it was an expansion and intensification? That's what Tokyo said?
Much larger than previous years.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Michael, how provocative is all this? Or, as Alex has said, is it just simply punishment for those, the announcement about the talks, the bilateral talks between Japan and the Philippines?
Well, it's certainly an escalation. It's a projection of force. It's showing that China and Russia can and have been working together to strengthen their presence in the Indo-Pacific waters.
I guess the question is it disproportionate or proportionate?
Well, it's definitely out of proportion. This is as mentioned, a full combat package that's being utilized this time. It definitely seems to be an out-of-proportion response.
Okay. Now, this is Japan Defense Minister Koizumi Shinjiro at the Shangri-La Dialogue. Watch.
Some of you may have heard the term new militarism, but nothing further from the truth. Think about it. There is a country that has a huge arsenal of nuclear weapons and strategic bombers. Japan has neither of such weapons, and yet Japan is labeled new militarism. Isn't it strange?
Now let's take a look at some figures. On the left, we have China's nuclear bombers at 136 in 2015. On the right, they have increased 60% to 219 by 2025. Japan's remained at 0 over that period until now. In addition, the Pentagon estimated China has 600 nuclear warheads in 2024 and is on track to having 1,000 by 2030, whereas Japan has 0. And yet China still accuses Japan of neo-militarization and seeking to acquire nuclear capabilities. Indeed, this Chinese state mouthpiece says of adding 20 Japanese military firms to its export ban, the objective is the same: to curb Japan's remilitarization and its ambitions to acquire nuclear capabilities. So China keeps repeating it wants to curb what it calls Japan's militarization. What do you make of this?
So I would argue this as a hypocrisy at its highest, because once again, China is the one who has nuclear weapons. Japan does not. China is the one that has strategic bombers and flying it around Japan. Japan does not have strategic bombers. China is building multiple aircraft carriers. Japan does not have attack aircraft carriers. China has massive military force. It has a rapidly growing naval and air power, and it has been increasing its military spending for 3 decades. Japan, once again, is not doing that. So I would argue that what Japan is doing is simply a reaction to what the Chinese side has been doing. So once again, to say that Japan is engaging in some type of a neo-militarism is a hypocrisy in my view.
And Japan, as you said, has been transparent that China is the biggest threat to its security. He's written this many times in strategic documents. So do you think that is, the answer to resolving this issue, because it's China saying that it doesn't like Japan's defense buildup, is the answer Beijing itself?
Yes. So if Beijing becomes more transparent, starts being less aggressive, then there's no need for Japan to increase our defense capabilities. So China has the key to curbing Japan's current defense posture for sure.
Okay. So the definition, let's have a look, of militarization is this: the process of becoming ready for conflict or war is militarization. Sometimes militarization refers to making a civilian organization resemble the armed forces with uniforms or weapons, for example. So, Alex, I wanted to ask from your perspective, let's talk about the two, Japan and China. Mm-hmm. Which one do you think, conforms to this definition more?
I think Beijing and Tokyo will give you different answers. That speaks exactly the complexity of this issue, because Beijing's position is to hold the condition or situation by the end of World War II. It says the international order that been defined by the end of the World War II. So it always talk about the Potsdam Declaration and the Cairo Declaration and the United Nations and the other peace treaties. But for Japan, the national security concern is that a growing military threat posed by China and a changing dynamics of the United States national security strategy, especially related to the Western Pacific.
But Alex, that comparison between China's military and Japan's military.
Of course,
there's no comparison,
if we do bean counting, of course, China is the largest, in terms of weapon systems and manpowers. China is the largest military power in Asia. But I think Beijing people will tell you that the Japanese scientific and technological advantage is still there. They are not doing those in the past decades. So the Chinese worry was about whether Japan will activate their capability to build up their military might.
Okay, so Michael, China is worried that Japan will reactivate its military might. What do you think China should do if it really wants to change this situation?
Well, as Akira-san mentioned, China can end this militarization for Japan, for Taiwan, and regional allies in the First Island chain. We are about building up our deterrence. We're about building up our defensive capabilities so that peace and the status quo can be maintained. China here, on the other hand, is the coercive side. So they bear the responsibility for this kind of, if there's any military build-up on both sides, it's China that needs to bear the responsibility.
Akira-san, if I can bring you back in. After the last Chinese-Russian joint patrol in December 2025, now Trump sent 2 B-52 bombers to fly alongside Japanese jets along the same route, and that was obviously in support of Tokyo. So do you expect a similar move to take place?
So something similar would probably be a good idea because it's a way to show that Japan and US is a strong ally. And also, I think the US needs to send a message to this new China-Russia nexus that's now brewing over the last couple of years. Because once again, Russia is a country that's engaging in the invasion of Ukraine as we speak, right? They are using force to change the status quo. And China and Russia, this country that is now invading Ukraine, is working together in a very close fashion. So US needs to show, along with Japan, that what China is doing with Russia is unacceptable.
Alex, what message would the sending of B-52 bombers send to China, or put it another way, if the US did not do this? What message would it send?
If the United States changed their previous practice and did not send the political signal back, did not send the bombers to fly the same route of the China-Russia exercises, that will send a signal not only to China that the United States is changing course. It will send a negative message to regional allies, and even increase the anxiety of the American allies in the region. I think Japan needs that signal, and many other countries in the First Island chain
including
also.
Taiwan. Michael, I mean, I saw you nodding your head there, but let's say if the Americans did not do that, what would be the likely response longer term for Japan and US allies in this region? I mean, if they did not believe that US nuclear umbrella could be relied on.
Well, it would cast doubt on US extended deterrence. And so for allies and partners in the region, Japan, but even Korea, South Korea, Taiwan, Philippines, it will it will encourage them to look at ways to be independent, right? Such as you mentioned, explore nuclear options. It could even push some of the countries closer to China. When they feel that the US support isn't there, they could logically reach the conclusion that they might as well align themselves with China.
So
this could be the case for Korea, for example.
Okay. So for the latter, China would be quite happy with that. But for the former, i.e. if these countries then became independent in terms of their nuclear weapons, then would that be a backfiring of China's strategy?
Of course, it could be. It could very well be. So those are the potential consequences of their actions that China needs to consider, of course, before these actions. And I'll add one point that U.S. response to such a patrol is also a way to send a message to both China and Russia. It's sending a message to them that we know that you two are working together closely in the northern Pacific waters and skies, and we see you, and we will be responding. So I think it's important that the U.S. sends the right signal both to its allies and its adversaries.
Especially at this time.
Yep.
What China did south of Yonaguni appears to have a precedent 10 days earlier. On June 6th, for 5 days, China sent its largest patrol vessel to the waters east of Taiwan as part of a fleet that carried out a coordinated multi-Chinese ministry enforcement operation. In what appears to be a bid to project Chinese jurisdiction, the operation involved the Chinese Ministry of Transport, the Maritime Safety Administration, and the East China Sea Rescue Bureau. This fleet didn't just survey the seabed, it went as far as issuing instructions instructions to foreign commercial vessels, in effect setting up Chinese navigation within Taiwan's EEZ. Akira-san, now the area near Yonaguni this time in focus is a little farther north, closer to Japan. Would you take what we saw east of Taiwan a month ago as a template of what might happen to Japan?
So in a way, this is a classic Chinese salami tactics, right? Going inch by inch, delving into new areas. And if you look at Japan's trajectory of its security policies, you can see that in a way, it's a counterclockwise from 12 o'clock and going back. In the beginning, we were caring about Russian aggression, so we were looking towards the north. Then we had the North Korean threat come, so we were starting to look towards more to the 9 o'clock side. But then you started having these Chinese activities in around Taiwan and around the southern prefecture of Japan. And now we have to look down to 6 o'clock and now even to the Pacific to 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock location because of these Chinese activities. So once again, whenever China worries about the reactions from the Japanese side, they really need to realize that what's creating this reaction is really everything that China is doing.
Do you believe that they could dare to issue instructions to foreign vessels like they did a month ago?
I think so, for sure. I think China is engaging in, once again, the salami slicing tactic like thing where they're incrementally pushing the boundaries to see what is acceptable and what they can do. So yeah, I definitely see them doing that in the future.
Okay. Now to the international response. The de facto US embassy here in Taiwan responded to a CNA query about the activities of China like this. China's actions are deeply destabilizing. We urge Beijing to cease its military, diplomatic and economic pressure against Taiwan and instead engage in meaningful dialogue with Taiwan's democratically elected authorities. The British, French and German officers in Taipei made a joint statement. We have noted with concern Chinese activity in the waters east of Taiwan. These actions threaten regional stability and the freedom of navigation and safety of international shipping. We reiterate our opposition to any unilateral change to the status quo, particularly by threat or use of force or coercion. Alex, let me ask you, so, how remarkable was it that China did what it did in Japan? I mean, Japan is a G7 member, in their EEZ to say that they had sovereignty over this water.
I think from Taiwan's standpoint, we do have our act of the Republic of China Territorial Sea and Contiguous Zone, and another act of Republic of China Exclusive Economic Zone and the Continental Shelf. So I think from Taiwan's perspective, if we do not stand firm on our own claim of our EEZ and the Continental Shelf, according to our own laws, then that gives discussions of other countries that are talking about the overlapping EEZ area that involving Taiwan's interests, number one. Number two, we do appreciate, the Americans and other friendly countries that issuing statement expressing their concern. But I'm very curious about whether they instruct, their foreign ministry instructed their embassy in Beijing to issue that statement, rather than letting Taipei office to do that.
10 days later, they seem to be doing something or have done something similar to Japan. So are you trying to say that this is simply an extension of their pressure on the ROC?
If PRC, Coast Guard ships or maritime survey ships that infringe upon the Japanese exclusive EEZ, then I take one position. But if it is done in the overlapping EEZ claims, then I would encourage Taiwan government to issue a strong statement as well.
Well, why don't we ask Michael, is China's strategy backfiring because China has sought to isolate Japan and also curb its supposed militarization?
Of course, I think its unintentional consequence is that it's united regional partners, not just regional partners, but every country which has a stake. In the Taiwan Strait security and freedom of navigation, you see other countries issuing their joint statements of support and concern. I think if China were to further escalate the situation, for example, by trying to issue instructions to foreign commercial vessels, for example, that would represent another sort of escalation because it's not just signaling, it's beginning to assert kind of de facto jurisdiction. So I think that will provoke a stronger response from countries in potential joint exercises.
Okay. Now, also just last week, General Ron Clark, commander of the U.S. Army's Theater Army for the Pacific, mentioned a series of 53 exercises involving 24 countries known as Operation Pathways, described by the Pacific Army as, quote, deliberately planned and meticulously executed annually. The exercises are joint, bilateral and multilateral and undertaken over the course of a year in 2 periods, May and June, and again in September and October. Clark said the reason for that is that's when the sea states are favorable for a cross-grade invasion from mainland China to Taiwan. So if our highest duty is to deter war, we have to have combat credible forces forward through an exercise program that allows us to position ourselves to deter war. That's really our first duty. And he added, having those credible forces in position will deter our adversaries from bad actions. Akira-san, how well known is the overall vision of Operation Pathways, these 53 exercises?
So I would argue that these exercises are known in defense circles, but to be honest, it's not widely understood by the Japanese public. But I think the important point here is that it's not a 53 separate exercises, right? It's a series of exercises to really show, to make the deterrence capability of U.S. and its allies and partners as being practical, that the U.S. is working with allies to show that if China tries to engage in some sort of aggressive, proactive actions, then that would fail.
And Alex, this admission that the full bulk of the exercises were to deter a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. How new is that?
I think the Operation Pathways was incepted 12 years ago. But why this is an issue that of utmost importance this year is because that it has a very clear target and identified period of time that combining or integrating or collaborating different exercises, bilateral and multilateral, with a very clear target of Chinese invasion over Taiwan.
So are you saying that that's new? That it's China?
So Operation Pathways had been there for a while and gradually expanding.
Yeah.
But this year, in particular, is that it stated clearly that it was aiming at a potential Chinese invasion over Taiwan.
Right. So how do you read that, Michael? This change just this year. I assumed that it was longer. And does that make China the victim?
Well, I think as Alex mentioned correctly, like this is in response to this growing threat, and think this is an open admission that look, these exercises are held at these times precisely because we think that's the time that China can pose the biggest threat, and we're responding to that. This exercise, it's a series of these individual exercises lumped together. It's about creating cumulative effect. It's about making sure that there's integrated allied readiness, and it's taking place in the first island chain close to Taiwan waters, exactly in preparation for such a scenario to happen. It doesn't make China the victim, of course. I think victimhood isn't defined by that. It's not defined by how much you spend on the military either. It's about whether you are being coerced, right? And for example, in the Taiwan situation, China is definitely not the victim. They are the coercive party. And so what the regional allies, the US, Japan, Philippines, and others are doing is to try to maintain peace and strengthen deterrence in preparation for such a potential coercive scenario.
Yeah, and probably just to defend themselves.
Okay, exactly, yes.
Okay, we'll have to end it there. Thank you so much, Alexander Huang, Michael Chen, Akira Igata. Thank you so much for joining us. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.